Momoshiki's secret ability is what is going to allow Boruto and Kawaki to actually be able to take down Jura. But the way I see it right now, it is most likely not going to be in the way that everybody is thinking. And this is due to the simple fact that Momoshiki, out of everybody else, is going to be the person who knows how to deal with the Ten Tails in a way that nobody else at the current moment could actually deal with. And that is simply due to the fact that he is an Otsutsuki. And we did learn from Amado that the Ten Tails is a tool that Otsutsukis have used for countless of years to be able to evolve by them creating a chakra fruit. The Ten Tails is the seedling that evolves into the divine tree that ultimately bears a chakra fruit. So we have these Otsutsukis that have lived for millennia and other Otsutsukis that have found a way to become Otsutsuki gods by eating multiple chakra fruits over and over again and then evolving into an Otsutsuki god. So it is quite clear that the Otsutsuki clan, who we have currently seen, although we don't know too much about them right now, the one thing that we have seen is that they do have a structure, a plan. They come in pairs, they come with the Ten Tails, and they know exactly what to do so that not only one of the Otsutsukis ends up getting a chakra fruit and allows it to evolve a little bit further, but the other Otsutsuki that is sacrificed also has a way to come back. It means that the Otsutsuki fully understand this tool of the Ten Tails. So, Momoshiki actually working with Boruto to defeat Jura is going to be a very crucial part in figuring out exactly how they are going to be able to deal with Jura, as Kashin Koji hasn't given us any hints about how it could take place, and since Boruto doesn't seem to be going along with Kashin Koji and views this as his plan, the plan that is going to work and save everybody else, it is quite clear that Momoshiki holds some sort of information that is going to be important. So how exactly is Jura going to be defeated? There's obviously the first method that everybody thinks about, and that method deals with Jura actually being killed. Jura is destroyed like we have seen other characters be destroyed in the past. But due to the way that the story is currently going, I don't see that as being the case. And we can see that by looking at the current patterns that are being displayed here. Numerous times in the Naruto series, when a character is too strong for the two main characters, in Naruto being Sasuke and Naruto, and in Boruto being Kawaki and Boruto, when a character arises that is too strong for them to deal with individually, that character tends to end up being sealed. This is what we saw with Kaguya, and we have seen this with other characters, where they were not strong enough to be able to deal with them, so they end up being sealed. So the way that Jura will be dealt with, I doubt we're going to be going down the path of Jura actually being physically killed. I believe we're going to go down a different path, and this is why Momoshiki is going to be crucial. As I've always wondered how Momoshiki will react to Jura's existence. Is this a phenomenon that has happened in the past? Or is this a phenomenon that is completely different and unique to anything that Momoshiki has seen? And due to the way that Momoshiki seems a little bit chill, doesn't seem too disturbed by Jura's presence, we didn't see him comment too much on Jura. This could be intentional so that we later on get something different, but everything right now is currently pointing towards this being a phenomenon that could have appeared in the past. The first point I'd like to point to is the fact that this isn't the first time that we have seen the Ten Tails / Divine Tree actually be altered. We have seen this another time in the Naruto series, and that was with Kaguya. Kaguya, for some odd reason, she knew that she could manipulate the Divine Tree in order to create the White Zetsu, and this fact that we learned from Sasuke, who ended up finding Kaguya's role, isn't something that Momoshiki, Urashiki, or even any other Otsutsuki seem too disturbed by finding out. It's not something that doesn't seem like a possibility, which means that Kaguya most likely knew this information beforehand, that the Divine Tree could be used to create these soldiers, these White Zetsu soldiers that would hypothetically be able to help her combat versus the Otsutsukis that are going to be sent towards her, as she ended up betraying Ishiki and being the one to eat the Divine Tree. which does end up not only telling us that there are rules to the Otsutsukis, but the Otsutsukis themselves know that they can manipulate the divine tree and also the Ten Tails in a way that allows their power to be used for themselves, in a way that allows the Ten Tails not to serve just as a seedling, or the divine tree not to serve just as a way to get a chakra fruit, but also as a means towards power, also as a weapon. This makes it even more likely to believe the interpretation that this may not be the first time that the Senju have been created, using the Ten Tails and the Karma. The next reason why this makes sense goes alongside just that. The Ten Tails needs Otsutsuki DNA in order to evolve into the divine tree and bear fruits, but it also needs Otsutsuki DNA in order to evolve into the Senju that we see right here. When it comes to the general divine tree, they sacrifice an Otsutsuki, and that Otsutsuki tends to be the weakest, which means that it is an act that is looked down upon with dishonor in a certain way due to the simple fact that the strongest simply don't have to do this. It's only if you're weaker that you're forced to be in this sort of position. Meaning that it is not necessarily something that an Otsutsuki would like to do. Nobody would really want to be sacrificed to the Ten Tails, and it was one of the reasons why we saw Jigen stoop down to that level, because it was truly his only option, his only real option in one, getting a chakra fruit, but also finding out a vessel later on. That's why when he finds out that Boruto is alive, Jigen actually starts stalling. He is not as pressed for time, as he knows that he doesn't actually have to use Jigen and die to come back into Kawaki later on. All he really has to do is now feed Boruto to the divine tree, and that divine tree is ultimately going to bear fruit. He will not have to sacrifice himself, and he simply has to come back in Kawaki. This just tells us that the Otsutsukis don't necessarily like the idea of sacrificing themselves. And that could be due to multiple reasons. One, we already know how hard it is for an Otsutsuki to find the perfect vessel. Jigen only really worked out due to the fact that Ishiki first had to feed inside his body. And we already know that Ishiki had to work with a model for him to sustain Jigen's body as it was heavily damaged. Ishiki needed the Ten Tails chakra in order to be able to tap into version 2 karma, and we have seen with Jigen's experimentation, it is quite hard to find an actual vessel, as with every experiment that he did, the only vessel he got was Kawaki, and even Code being there was just a fluke according to Amato. This may end up suggesting that the Otsutsukis may have attempted in the past to find a way in which the Otsutsuki would not need to necessarily sacrifice himself, a way in which we could cause the Ten Tails to evolve prematurely into the divine tree, and that may have occurred using the similar method that Code did, where Code did this by accident, by trying to create the claw grinds, but in this case the Otsutsuki's did it on purpose, to see just how much Otsutsuki DNA is needed to give the Ten Tails to cause it to evolve into a divine tree that bears fruit without necessarily requiring an Otsutsuki sacrifice. And by doing that, that is when I believe that the Otsutsuki's first encountered the Senju, and the Senju were created then, leading to the Ten Tails obtaining consciousness. But what is the problem with that? The problem with that is simply the fact that we know that the Senju are currently not going towards the goal of creating a chakra fruit. They now have their own personal identities and personal ambitions, personal curiosities that they are trying to achieve first before actually creating a chakra fruit. This is why the Otsutsukis may potentially view the Senju as a defect, as an evolution that is not necessarily needed, and why we don't see the Otsutsuki's simply utilize the karma to cause the Ten Tails to evolve prematurely. So when Momoshiki does end up viewing Jura, I do believe that there is going to be statements that point towards the fact that the Senjus are abomination, tools that have gained consciousness and are no longer performing their role, and thus they need to be eradicated. And this is where Momoshiki comes into play, as if the Otsutsuki's have already dealt with the Senju in the past, or at least have already dealt with the Ten Tails evolving into this conscious being. It is quite possible that the Otsutsuki's also has a way of either controlling the Ten Tails or actually sealing it, as every time we have actually seen an Otsutsuki use the Ten-Tails, we have seen how much damage the Ten-Tails did to the actual planet when we saw it in the 4th Great Ninja War. However, the Otsutsukis don't really view it as a threat. They simply view it as an animalistic tool, a tool that is just trying to eat anything that comes around it. But Jigen/Ishiki knew exactly how to seal it, to reduce its mobility and to make it not do any damage, as it would simply cage in Ishiki's palace, and Ishiki would use it as a way to consume its chakra. So what we could see take place is that Momoshiki may possess a secret ability, just like how the Rinnegan allowed characters like Madara, Nagato, and Obito to have access towards controlling the Ten-Tails, as was displayed in the 4th Great Ninja War. There could be an aspect in which Momoshiki is somebody who knows abilities that work directly against Jura, or at least he may know Jura's personal weakness. This leads me to believe that there are 3 possible ways in which we could see Jura be dealt with. The first one is by having Jura completely exhaust his chakra to the point where he dies. This was a way that we saw Kurama die in Boruto itself, where his chakra was completely exhausted. This could end up taking place, however, if it does, it would probably mean that the fight lasted pretty long, or it would mean that Jura used an ability similar to Baryon mode, which caused him to drain a lot of his chakra. And if Jura was to tap into Baryon mode, I am completely scared about what exactly would take place, so I doubt that's going to be the path that happens, as the planet would be destroyed. I simply do not doubt that. The second option is for Jura to be sealed. We have seen Otsutsukis like Kaguya using different methods like the planetary devastation, and it ended up allowing Naruto and Sasuke to be able to seal Kaguya. The reason why I personally don't believe that this is going to be a route that takes place is due to the simple fact that not only did it take Naruto and Sasuke both their chakras combined to be able to do that with Kaguya, but there was a specific jutsu that was supposed to work. And that's why we had Hagoromo play a big factor in it even being able to take place. And we don't really see the same setup when it comes to Jura. So I don't believe that that is the case. And there is another way. One way is to tame the Ten-Tails, to tame Jura. And I don't mean to tame Jura in an aspect in which Jura is personally going to switch sides and be with Boruto and Kawaki. I mean it in a way that we saw Jigen in the past use the chakra rods as a way to tame and control the Ten-Tails, as the Ten-Tails was stuck and encaged in that specific dimension. What we could see take place is that Jura is put in a completely different dimension, where Momoshiki, either using the chakra rods or the secret ability that they have that allows him to control the Ten-Tails, as we also have to keep in mind that the Otsutsuki are able to transport the Ten-Tails to each and every one of their planets that they go through. Obviously, we know that they have the Karma Seal, but using the Karma Seal as a way to end up moving the Ten-Tails still means that the Ten-Tails is no longer encaged, which means that for that period of time, there has to be a way in which the Ten-Tails is subdued and controlled. And we have seen with the Rinnegan, the Ten-Tails could be subdued and controlled. So I definitely believe that Momoshiki may know an ability. Maybe it exhausts a lot of chakra, maybe there's a different weakness or a time constraint that he needs in order to be able to do so, but he may be the very own key to being able to control or subdue Jura for a set period of time, in which they will have to find a way to keep Jura caged up for a period of time, or to ultimately just defeat and kill Jura. That is the personal way I believe that Momoshiki is going to be the key in taming Jura, in encaging Jura in a manner in which Jura can no longer do harm. But what is super important to discuss is exactly how the Divine Tree roots are going to play a part in everything happening, as we don't really know too much about its location. Do the Divine Tree roots ride in a completely different location? And if that is the case, why is it able to come through Earth and then have Jura still use it as a way to heal? So there's multiple different questions that we can ask, and dealing with the Divine Tree roots is going to be important, as I definitely believe that it plays a role in Jura's power and the various sorts of things that we have seen Jura manifest. So that is another aspect that we're going to have to be able to discuss in order to find a way in which Jura is going to be destroyed. But all this really lies in understanding exactly what the Senju are in order to find their weakness. And if you want to find out exactly who they are to find a way to defeat them, watch this video right here.